Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're live. And this is Welcome to Neurodiversity, Empowering Learning and Employment. My name is Gavin O'Mara. I'm the CEO and founder of FE News. And I'd love to bring in my co-host, Louise Karwowski from Cognassist. Lou, how are you?
Great, Gavin. Thank you. Great to be here. I'm really excited for the season finale. Yeah!
With two really epic guests. Everyone, I'd love to highlight as well, we are live. It is now currently 10:01. We'd love for you to ask any questions to Lou or to our guests, Lee Harrison and Dan Harris, two incredible experts in the world of neurodiversity. But this has all been around empowering neurodiversity in learning and employment. And I think the season's gone really well. Everyone's had a lot of feedback. I know there's a couple of questions that people have asked over the series, which I know you want to unpack a little bit later, Lou. But it's been really cool, isn't it? I think it's the way it's built, and we've tried new things. I think it's kind of cool, really.
It's landed really well, hasn't it? People have really grasped the concept of sort of the delivery of it. We really wanted to address cognition and like good delivery in terms of best practice, and that's really been accepted. So delighted.
Yeah, it's all cool. And I think it's maybe like jump right into it, really, because this has all been around empowering learning and employment, and particularly neurodiversity and what we can do. And it's brilliant. There's actually been a lot of desire from the audience right now, like different people that are not sort of in like the neurodiversity set. It's sort of reached a lot of different people to be thinking about this, really. So I wonder if I could bring in our guests. We've got Lee Harrison from RSPCA, and we've got Dan Harris from Neurodiversity in Business. Lee, Dan, I wonder if you could join us in the studio.
Hello.
Hey, Lee, how are you?
Hi, morning. Very well, thank you. Excited.
No, it's good. We are too. I've been really excited about this, like a full-on week of like getting built up to it, really. So it's good. I wonder if we could kick it off really with this is looking at both learners and also looking at how we can support neurodiversity in business. But first up, how do we empower neurodiverse learners? So for a little bit of background, Lee is kind of interesting because you're ex-training provider background and also now RSPCA employer side. So maybe, Lee, if we could maybe ask you to kick this off, how do we empower neurodiverse learners?
I think the big thing is just making sure that learners feel comfortable to disclose and to have conversations with you about their individual needs. In recent conversations with some other employers, they've gone as far as predicting what those needs might be and it not being right. So I think it's important to empower them by being inclusive enough for them to feel that they can approach you and disclose what their needs might be, to be open and inclusive in that sense. I think that's the most important thing in terms of empowerment, to make sure that the brand and how you look and that you have inclusive policies and things so that people do feel comfortable.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Lou, I know you had a question for Lee actually around sort of looking sort of progression and sort of moving.
Yeah, I do. Just to tap into your experience, Lee, of education and employment, there's a stat I want to share to open the question, if that's all right. And that's 76% of employees choose not to disclose their neurodiversity, 76%. Now, that's very different in education. So what happens to those learners who disclose and then go into employment and choose not to disclose? Like, what happens in that transition, and how can we make improvements?
Yeah, scary statistic. I think there's two things to look at there. I think one of them would be at that sort of handover from the apprenticeship world, let's say, into as they transition into not being an apprentice with their employer or with a new employer. And I thought I'd muted myself then. And what further education providers can do in terms of passing on that information or encouraging those apprentices to disclose such information to their employer. But also, I've not got the statistic, but what percentage of people have undiagnosed needs, and what conversations are going on between employees and their employers about what they think their needs are. without a diagnosis, either because they're on a waiting list to be diagnosed, or because they know they have a specific need or a certain way of working, but don't feel like they can disclose it. So, like when going back to the original question, where people transition from school, let's say, into college or further education, and there's some sort of handover and that kind of thing into the apprenticeship world, there needs to be something else. There needs to be something for the further education world to pass on to employers to assist. But it goes back to what I was saying before about people being feeling like they can open up and disclose their needs, and that's down to the employer to make sure that their brand, their policies, that they have people within the organisation that understand additional needs, and they have networks of people that people with neurodiversity can open up to and talk to, that understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's interesting as well, because some stats we sort of shared at the beginning of the season. So that's like 10 weeks ago now. So if anyone hasn't seen that, but on top of that, 76% of employees that don't want to disclose their neurodiversity, is only 7% of employers globally have got a neurodiversity or neuro-inclusive plan, which is like kind of low. So Dan, any sort of anything you want to sort of share or tips on how to encourage employees to disclose about their neurodiversity? I mean, there could be a reason for it, that they've not had a diagnosis, do you know what I mean, or that they don't know. Because I think, Lou, we're looking at level 3 apprenticeships, it's about a third of people have got just not aware. But there's also a reality of people are frightened not to disclose, do you know what I mean, and that they're afraid that they're not going to be able to to get a role or something like that. But how can we sort of change that? How can we help employers to have a more encouraging neurodiversity plan, and to encourage more openness in this? Dan, I'd love to know your take on that, really.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. And it's always a tough act to follow from Lee and Louise, but I'll give it a go. So I'm really pleased the way you frame that question, actually, Gavin, because for me, the statistic that's quoted is helpful, but it's a really kind of high level, it's somewhat a dated statistic. So in neurodiversity in business, we were really cognizant of this. So we commissioned earlier in the year the first of its kind academic study of neurodiversity in the workplace, and we partnered with Birkbeck College, University of London. And one of the most interesting things that came out of that for me was that this is actually a two-way process. So yes, we talk about that kind of limited disclosure rate, and the statistics are changing all the time there. But the key thing that came out as it pertains to disclosure for us was actually that employers need to convince employees that work is a safe place to be openly neurodivergent. And we can talk about that qualitatively until the cows come home. We all know what that feels like in the workplace, right? But why is that? That was the next question that we asked. So we found that 65% of the neurodivergent employees feared discrimination from management, 55% from colleagues, and then really interestingly, 40% said there just aren't any knowledgeable staff to help, right? So we could unpick all of those statistics, and maybe we'll do a bit later. But before we do, I also wanted to say that this is a two-way process, because employers who contributed to this academic research, obviously, they said that they experienced barriers to making those adjustments, because 69% that said that lack of disclosure is an issue. So you can see the catch-22 here, right? Difficult. Yep. 65% said that managers don't know enough to actually do anything. And then this is quite depressing. 30% had little faith that the adjustments work. And I can tell that 30% they are wrong. And Lee, I'd be interested in your view. Am I right in divorcing that statistic?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. It goes back to what I was saying before, doesn't it, about individuals knowing their needs and what works best for them, whether that's a quiet space to work or whether that's assistive technologies, whatever it might be. It's important to have those conversations with them and not just assume that you can put certain things in place and that's going to help.
I think also it's another thing as well around the business case of why to have a diverse team. Do you know what I mean? If that should probably remove that sort of barrier that if employers, particularly those managers that obviously need a bit of educating, is to why is it good to have a diverse team? I think that then sort of knocks that out the park really as to why there's lack of faith that it will make any difference. I think if people understand why it's a really good idea to have diverse teams, then that sort of cuts all of that sort of fear out of the way, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, and when people say they don't have faith, somewhat that is around faith, but somewhat it's also what's the cost to me? What resources do I need to put into this? And how can I cope when I'm busy enough already, 9 to 6, with my day job? But the reality is, and I'd be interested in Louise's point of view here, is that these adjustments that neurodivergent folk are asking for are, number one, mostly pretty limited cost. Number two, are relatively easy to implement. And number three, and this is really important, you get this right for your neurodivergent folk and you get this right across the business. Louise, what do you think?
Absolutely, Dan. We covered all those points in the series. A lot of strategies are free, or very, very cheap. And those that cost can be accessed through access to work funding. So that should be part of standard practice. You should have reasonable adjustments as part of your recruitment process, but you need to have the offer of reasonable adjustments when an employee starts employment as well. And it's about education, I think. It's about training managers to go and look at podcasts, at videos, do some reading, like familiarize yourself with this idea. Strategies are not difficult to implement, but it's about equity. It's about getting the right strategy for the person at the time. And like Lee, you mentioned assistive tech. Assistive tech is brilliant, but there is some trial and error involved in finding what works for you, like even down to the nuance of what voice works best for text-to-speech users. Like I use text-to-speech all the time, and it's taken me like quite a while to figure out what voice works for me at what pace and what tone. So I think it's about sort of dedicating some time to enhancing your knowledge in this area and familiarizing yourself with what is out there, Dan. As you say, this isn't a scary thing. It's quite easy to implement, but it has to be right.
Yeah, definitely. There's someone actually. This is Dan was talking. Actually, I was trying to think of. I was going to seg them in, like in they go. Like you didn't mystery LinkedIn user, and I think you've got a really good point here. The learner, because we're talking about apprentices here. Yeah, an apprentice is also an employee. If the learner is able to adjust their learning styles during their training, then it's a plus for the employer, as it shows the employee capacity for gaining additional skills and adaptability, isn't it? I think it's 100% agree with you there. But Lee had a really good point, and I know that some of my team like certain voices. If we're talking about, some voices seem to work for some people more than others. Like, there's some people that do like to hear like from Snoop Doggy Dogg on stuff like that. Some things for a laugh.
Brian Blessed.
But like, but I think it's really interesting. It's to how to lift this for people. Yeah, how to be able to help people with different styles, really. So Lee, anything you've got on like tip wise on how to help employees with, you've got different styles of employees that are working in RSPCA, so is there anything in there you've seen around reasonable adjustments for your team?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number going on the same topic. Actually, I was looking at a statistic this morning that said that 59% of workplace adjustments for neurodiverse employees cost nothing. Like,
yeah.
So we need to, any barriers that are there, I mean, they're are fairly easy to remove in terms of putting workplace adjustments in place. Yes, there are some that do cost them things, but what was the original question again, Gavin? Sorry, just wanted to throw that stat out there.
No, it's important, and I think it's all around reasonable adjustments in the business. How can what sort of tips have you got around different types of employees that and ways to be able to deliver reasonable adjustments?
Yeah, like you said, in the RSPCA, it's vast. There are people that work in animal centres that work predominantly with animals and then caring for the welfare of animals. And then we've got people that work in your sort of head office type functions that are sort of finance, HR, IT. And it's just understanding not just the the adjustments that can be made, but also what are their sort of skills of these people, and understanding their skills, and not just saying that job role is right for that person, when actually, when you speak to these particular neurodiverse employees that have particular skill sets where they excel, and some others where they may not, and tapping into that skill set. So it's important not just to think about workplace adjustments, but also tapping into the skills, if you like, the superpowers of the neurodiverse employees, to make sure that they're doing their best, and also that you as an employer are getting the best out of them. In terms of adjustments, it's just vast, isn't it? It could be putting things in place for dyslexia, dyscalculia, those types of things. You know, even just the coloured overlays, understanding that not just giving a green overlay to a person that has dyslexia and thinking that's the right fit. That was something that somebody mentioned on a meeting a couple of weeks ago. That what colour is best for them, what helps them best. Do they like to read through information? Can you send them information before a course starts, for example? Are they more visual? Do they prefer to watch videos? Would they like a transcript? You know, the list is endless. But unless we ask the right questions to those people that are neurodiverse, you will not give them the right support. So what we've tried to do, particularly around internal communications and things, is have maybe, you know, 2 or 3 different versions of those internal communications to be more inclusive, if you like. So there might be a video, there might be a transcript, there might be some sort of other way of learning. So it's important to put different things in place and understand that not just for neurodiversity, but for your employee base as a whole, that everybody's different and everybody learns in a different way.
That's the powerful thing, isn't it? And Dan, you mentioned it as well. And I think that's the point. If you make inclusive practices for your neurodiverse workforce, you're going to include everybody just by doing so. So holistic approaches are really powerful, and that flexibility that you mentioned, Lee, is going to have a huge impact for all employees and all learners.
Yeah, and look, we're full of positivity, us 4 today, and that's a great thing. But I want to ground us for a minute. So, look, post-COVID, where is it's perfectly acceptable now for me as a father to say to my boss, look, at 4 o'clock on Friday, I need to leave early because I'm going to go pick my girl up from a karate class, right? That's accepted now in the hybrid world. What's still not accepted is putting your hand up in a meeting and saying, sorry, you know, this meeting isn't working for me. I don't communicate in this way. I'm not picking up the relevant bits of information. Could we have had an agenda? Can we have like a written summary after the meeting? Would you be able to clarify action points at the end? These are still things which there is still stigma. We would feel quite nervous about raising this in an open forum. So whilst I am a big optimist, I do want to say that we're still starting from a pretty low bar. I'm interested in whether you agree with me on that.
I think personally, all good meetings have got an agenda, haven't they? If you know what I mean. I don't bother turning up to a meeting if it hasn't got an agenda, being open. But we
have the same rule at Cognassist, actually.
And then there's no point having a meeting if it ain't got an outcome. I think as well. So I think it's this good business practice, isn't it? If you know what I mean, really. But I totally agree, Dan. There's sometimes when if a meeting is being a bit, I'm terrible at this with my team. I got a bit waffle-tastic, and like, then how do you cut it down into make it a bit more chunky and make it so it's a bit more relevant to everyone? So I think it's all around developing a neuro-inclusive strategy, really, isn't it? You know, like only 7% of employers around the world have, which is low. And I think, would that increase the amount of productivity? Yeah, would it actually? What's the business case for it? I think is kind of, if we're being grounded, why do it? And I think it's raised productivity is going to be a key. Do you know what I mean? And
create the psychological safety that we're talking about, and boost motivation. You know, you're going to want to come to work if you feel supported and that you feel cared for by your employer.
Yeah, definitely. I think that leads into neuro-inclusive strategies, really. But before we get there, Melanie, don't worry, we're going to get to your question in a minute. Don't worry, it's fine. Yeah, go on, Dan.
Gavin, I want to jump in on that business case thing because at the risk of being controversial today, I want to rally against that kind of line of argument. There does not need to be a business case, okay? There is nothing in what businesses do which is exclusively profit driven. There needs to be a purpose for the organisation. Now, us neurodivergent folk are the 1 in 5, right? And we are a significant minority. You should be getting it right for us because you have a responsibility to do so. So when, and I know this wasn't the way your question was framed, but when businesses kind of look at the costs and the benefits, the other thing I'd like them to understand is from a macro level, if you're not getting this right for your neurodivergent folks, you can absolutely be sure that your competitors are, right? So there's an imperative around retention and even attraction of talent, which I think businesses have still not fully woken up to.
Yeah, I agree. So how can we develop a neuro-inclusive strategy and why? I think the point for the business case is exactly that, really. It's retention of top talent. Do you know what I mean? And it's also, productivity. The UK's kind of pants it, so how can we actually increase the amount of productivity with having diverse teams and diverse thought and new ways to tackle like the problems? If you come at the problem the same way for 20 years, you're going to come up with the same result, surely. So you need to sort of come at it from different angles, really. But Louise, what have you sort of seen around people developing their neuro-inclusive strategies in both education and the world of work?
They bring the neurodiverse people on board to help develop policies, strategies, processes. Again, like asking where are things broken? Why are things not working? Where are we letting you down? And then let's do something about it together. I really like the idea of networks as well. So this is prevalent in enterprise. We come across a lot of employee support groups, I should say, but not so much in education, actually. And I think there is this question of how do teachers and trainers support big numbers of learners with additional learning needs? And that, for me, is a really cool way to do it. A lot. Like, we hear it from clients all the time. Like, how do we do it en masse at scale? And actually, it shouldn't all be on the person doing the delivery or the manager that's supporting the team. Like, it needs to be a collaborative approach. So peer-to-peer support is huge, and we can really maximize on it, I think. So yeah, for me, it would be that a collaborative approach and get people involved, get people talking.
Yeah, no, definitely. It probably brings in a good point here from Melanie. I don't know if we got the stats on this. I know you've got a lot of data at Cognassist, Lou. Well, maybe if not, if we can't answer any of these questions today, guys, we'll do our very best to find someone who can. But Melanie's asking, do we know the dropout rate re neurodiverse apprentices? Because I don't. But Lou, I don't know if you would know that sort of stat at all.
The data's not that detailed, to be honest, but what I can comment on is, of course, we know the dropout rate is around 53% year on year in apprenticeships. We did do some research across 3 providers to see if cognition and cognitive learning differences contributed to that dropout rate. We found indeed it does. So, what we're learning here is learners who are unsupported, who don't have reasonable adjustments in place during programme and at endpoint, will drop out. Of course they will. So yeah, I don't know the actual percentage, but I can do some digging for you, Melanie, to see if I can find out. But we do know it is a contributory factor.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also Manika's got a point here as well, Dan, which covers what you was just literally talking about. And I think it sort of then leads us to to the point, what is the business case, really, I suppose, for neurally inclusive strategy? I think it's sort of everyone's sort of in agreement here. We need to be driving this home. But I think also, Dan, you got a really good point of grounding it down to not everyone. We're very, like you said, we're 4 very positive people here. But what is the business case for those that aren't?
Yeah. And I'd like to, if I may, just come back on the point Louise reflected on pertaining to that previous question we had, which was, you know, around the dropout rate. So I equally don't have any good statistics on that. But what I can tell you is that that is one part of the puzzle. An equally important, potentially bigger part of the puzzle is who is not in the room. So what I mean by that is that this isn't necessarily about what does the funnel look like once you get through recruitment and you're into kind of employment, apprenticeship, going on to kind of full-time employment. This is also about the fact that a significant, and I hear this week in, week out, I get hundreds of LinkedIn messages. Lots of neurodivergent individuals will literally not even consider applying to these big blue chip organizations because they just feel, look, it's too corporate. I'm never going to fit in. It's too formulaic. So we need to be having, as business leaders, we need to be having a very strong message out there, which is we want to become a neuro-inclusive employer. Mm-hmm. We're humble, right? We're on the start of a journey. We're not getting things right necessarily, but we want to hear from you. We want you to feel empowered to tell us about your differences. And most importantly, you know, how do we get the best out of you as an employee? As an employer, how do we get the best out of you as an employee? So these things are equally important because there is the big cultural change piece that we need to be thinking about rather than necessarily thinking, right, we can go out and attack a particular talent pool. We can, you know, get some really great resource to come into the business. We need to be thinking, if we do that, we might be amplifying those marginalizations which already exist in society. So we need to be slower and more kind of considerate, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and I think we've only just started to scratch the surface, which is kind of frustrating, really. If we was to dream and dream big, Dan, what would you want to see for this next sort of short term and then hopefully the long term as to how business can be more neuro-inclusive? What are some things that people can do like right now that they can make a difference in their business?
I've got two really simple things. So number one, Neurodiversity in Business is a charity set up to transform the life chances of neurodivergent individuals. We've got over 600 members right now. We would like to see all of the big organisations across the UK and globally signed up. But then, and this is where the sting in the tail is, the long-term measure of success for neurodiversity in business is that we cease to exist because neurodiversity is not even a considered topic. It's just differences in the way we think and operate. And that's our long-term aim, is to be successful, to put ourselves out of business.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. If, you know, one other question as well, and I think this is to you both, Dan and Lee, you know, large corporates would have a HR team. Do you know what I mean? So how can we equip HR teams? But an SME, one. So how can we support both? How what are sort of a real quick, simple way to be able to help a really large HR team, but also, you know, a small team of 5 people? And any sort of top tips at all?
Real quick one for me, particularly for SMEs, is to find somebody in the organisation. I mean, you do this in your large blue chip organisations too, that takes an interest in it, that maybe neurodiverse themselves or know somebody that is, somebody that's passionate about it, and tap into that and ask them, or, you know, just ask openly, would anybody like to do further learning on this? Would anybody like to take hold of this, make them a EDI champion, EDI ambassador, neurodiversity ambassador, and let them run with it?
Yeah, no, definitely. Dan, any quick top tips?
Just restate the angle there. Sorry.
So how can we offer a real quick takeaway support for a large corporate with a HR team, but also maybe an SME that is maybe 5 people, hasn't got a HR team at all?
Yeah, significantly more problematic, and we should respect that and understand that they aren't going to be able to make the quick progress that they would like to as quick as the big organisations. However, we've been really cognizant of that within Neurodiversity in Business, and we've on our website, we've got something called the ND Resource Hub, and that's a freely accessible resource that medium-sized and small enterprises can tap into to give the best quality advice that's out there across our ecosystem.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you. Lou, anything you'd want to say for a quick takeaway for people to be able to support their neurodiverse learners, but also how to equip their educators and leaders to be able to do that, but also in business, anything you've seen, because you've got huge data sets, deal with thousands of learners, thousands of employees. Any quick sort of tips for someone to go, right, how can I make a difference right now?
Absolutely. So I'm going to second Lee's point of champions. Champions are really powerful entities in any organisation. And like you say, Lee, it could be somebody who has struggled themselves and overcome those difficulties and challenges. And, if they've got strategies in place so they can share with the business, or they might have a child or a sibling or a relative who they've supported through. But for me, it's this holistic approach. I think big, think how you can sort of like support at scale. I think that's the quickest means. And, we do have blogs on this matter. If you want to go to Cognassist.com, there's loads of blogs and white papers that provide really cool suggestions for holistic approaches.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, we're out of time, everyone. We're actually over time. But thank you for today. Like, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Lee. Lou, what a season. Thank you so much.
It's been great.
Massive thank you to Joe as well in bringing this all together and catching the vision of what was kind of like, I've got an idea and what can we do with this really? So, that's really brilliant. Thank you also to Team FE News as well. Holly for sitting in on this one, but Finley and Danielle as well. Really enjoyed this season. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're scratching the surface. So I think one thing to get out of today is we do need champions, isn't it? And I think what Dan said earlier, that isn't it kind of sad that a load of people thought there was no one on hand to support? So we need to obviously work on that around having champions across all business, all of education and the world of work. But thank you everyone for joining us today. It's the start of a journey, isn't it? Hopefully in a year's time it'll be like 17%, 20%, 30%. And like Dan said, we ain't got to even bother having these sort of conversations because everyone can see the point of supporting everyone in this. So thank you. We'll see you again. No doubt we'll have another season coming soon around exploring how to support neurodiversity in both the world of work and the world of employment. But thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll see you really soon.
Thank you. Bye.